This video is going to be about getting my PD catheter placed. There's going to be 3 parts. The first part I'm going to talk a brief overview of what the surgery is and why, and kind of what the peritoneal membrane is. The second part will be my experience getting the surgery and the recovery. And the third part will be things that I wish I had done differently, or things that I will do differently if I have to go through this surgery again. Okay, a brief overview of what this surgery is and why you're getting it. If you want something a little more in-depth or a little more medical, then I saw other videos online about this. So you need a catheter to be able to do peritoneal dialysis. So what they do is they take some tubing and it goes into your peritoneal cavity. There's like a coil at the bottom that will help to fill it up with fluid and to drain. And that tubing comes all the way out of your abdomen and is attached to like I think they call it a transfer set. And that's where you're able to hook up to the fluid, whether you're doing manual or whether you're doing using the cycler. Your peritoneal membrane kind of surrounds your organs. I imagine it being kind of like a balloon. And if you were to punch the balloon, you wouldn't pop the balloon, but it would kind of shape itself to your fist or to your hand, whatever's poking into it. So I imagine that's kind of what the membrane is like, going around your organs, but inside there's nothing there. So they're able to put that tubing inside of that, and that fills up with fluid. And that membrane is able to act as a filter. It pulls out the extra salt, the extra fluids that you have, any toxins that your kidney would be able to get rid of if it was functioning. And it goes through that membrane, kind of filters through that and goes into that fluid. And then you drain that fluid and then you fill it up again with new clean fluid, and it does the same thing. PD catheter placement surgery is a day surgery, meaning you'll go in the morning, you'll have your surgery, and once you wake up, you're able to walk around, use the bathroom, you're sent home to recover. So when you get the surgery, they fill up your abdomen of air so that they're able to work in there. You're also going to be under general anesthesia, so you're not going to know what happens. You're going to get an IV, they're going to put you under, and then you'll wake up once the surgery is done. So this is my own experience, and yours will be different than mine. I just wanted to make this video to help prepare somebody to be better prepared than I was. I don't want to scare anybody because the surgery was difficult. It was harder than I thought it would be, but it was worth it. 100% worth it. If I had to do it again, even with the same mistakes that I made, I would. Being able to do PD at home I feel it's a blessing. Once my GFR was below 10, they scheduled me to get the surgery. It's a day surgery, so I went in early in the morning. From my house to the hospital where I had the surgery, it was about 35 minutes. We got there in good time because there just wasn't a lot of traffic that early in the morning. Once I was in the hospital and in I think they call it ambulatory surgeries, kind of like the day surgeries. When I was in there, they did a lot of tests before I was prepped for surgery. I had to put on the gown, I had an IV put in because you're going to go under. They did some blood tests before, and my hemoglobin was 6.8. So once it hits 7 or below, they usually do a blood transfusion because as you drop like that, it's just not good for you to be that anemic. I remember the nurses being hesitant to want to do the surgery. They're like, her hemoglobin is too low, and the surgeon's like, let's do it anyways. So got the surgery done. I can't remember how long I was under, but it's not a really quick surgery. My husband was in the waiting room pretty much all day because it takes me forever to wake up. After the surgery, they have like they put you in a separate room that for you to wake up from the surgery. And I remember there was a nurse next to me, kind of must be on a computer. The room was kind of dark. There's other people in hospital beds, and I remember like trying to wake up. It was so hard to wake up. And I remember the nurse saying, "Breathe, Bethany." And I'd go, "Oh yeah." And I'd breathe. And then I'd just be like, "Oh, I really don't feel good." And then I'd hear, "Bethany, breathe." And so I'd breathe. And so that I was kind of coming in and out. So I have little bits of memories, little bits of pictures of that. And then I was moved to another room where my husband was able to come and see me. When I kind of fully woke up, there was nobody else in that room. And there was my husband and me and a single nurse and nobody else, because everybody had gone home. It should have been closed for the day, but I was still there. So the nurse was trying to get me out. She wasn't rude, just maybe not as patient as she could have been, or maybe as we would have liked. I can understand her frustration. Maybe she has kids and she needs to get home. Usually they switch over around 7:30. So that just tells you how long I was there if I went early in the morning and didn't wake up until 7:20. So she was trying to get me out of the bed. "Okay, let's stand up. Let's walk." They hadn't really given me any more pain medication than what I originally had from the surgery. I remember just being so cold, and I got up and I was trying to get to the edge of the hospital bed, and my whole body just started to shake and just like shiver, as if I was so cold. And shivering was causing my abdominal muscles to kind of cramp, and that hurt a whole lot because they had just gone through trauma. And I tried to stand up. I did. I gave it a good college try. I did my best, and I couldn't do it. And I was like, I can't get up and walk. I can't. And she's running around kind of frustrated, and my husband's he's not sure what to do, because he's like, "No, she can't get up, but they're trying to push us out." And so her shift ended. She left, and they had to call a nurse from somewhere else to come down to be with me because the day surgery part of the hospital was closed. And she was so patient and not pushy at all. So she came, she saw that I was shivering, that I was cold, and she's like, "Let me get some hot water, like the hottest water you can stand, and why don't we sip that?" And that made a huge difference, because I was able to warm up from the inside out. That stopped me from shivering and trembling, and that made my body relax, and the stomach muscles, weren't spasming. And I probably just needed a little bit longer. But then after everything kind of calmed down, I got some more pain medication. And then I was able to stand up, walk around, use the restroom, and then I put my clothes on and I was sent home. I was excited to go home. Now, the ride home wasn't horrible. They gave me this pillow to kind of push against that area for the bumps and stuff. And it wasn't bad. I was exhausted. I was just ready to go home. So my husband pulled up to the front of our house where our front door is, and there's a single big step to get in. There's another way to get into our house, and that's through the basement, and that's a whole flight of stairs. So I knew I probably shouldn't do stairs after having abdomen surgery. So he helps me out of the car, helps me kind of walk there because I'm feeling weak. My muscles are just a little bit weak, a little bit shaky. I don't feel all that confident on my legs. So he's helping me. And then that step inside, I took the step as if I hadn't just had surgery. Now, I've never had abdomen surgery before. I have 3 kids, but none of them were C-sections, so I didn't fully appreciate how much you use your abdomen muscles. You use them for everything. So I took that step, and my body was like, "No, that is not okay. I don't know what you're doing." And I started to tremble again, that same kind of as if I was cold. It was kind of like in shock. And those abdominal muscles started to just cramp, and it hurt. And my husband ended up just kind of picking me up and setting me on the couch, which, bless his heart, but was really uncomfortable. And it took me a while to, you know, they got pillows and my body was shaking. It just took a couple minutes, maybe 5, to really ease my body, calm down my body from that trauma. And there may have been tears at that point. So that was pretty tough. So on our main floor, that front room, got the couch, there is a half bathroom on that floor. So I spent the next 4 days and 4 nights on that couch because I wasn't going to go up steps again.
I learned my lesson.
The hardest part was getting up from that couch and trying to figure out how do I stand up from that couch without using these muscles, and it was really hard. So I ended up having to kind of straighten myself, make sure I was absolutely straight, and I would wrap my arms around my husband's neck and kind of just hang on, and he would stand me up so that I didn't have to use those muscles, but it was really tough. And then getting into the restroom, I needed help, especially for those first 3 days, definitely the first 2 days. Needed help to be able to, did the same thing around my husband's neck, to be able to use the restroom, to sit down because our toilet is kind of low, and then to be able to stand back up off of it. So that was the hardest part, is trying to move to use the restroom. But I had pillows, I had blankets, my husband had water, I took my medication, but I lived on the couch. So for those first 3 days, I rotated the pain medication that they gave me and the Tylenol. I think it was every 4 hours. For those first 3 days, I took the medication. I'd often be like, is it time yet? Can I take it? Is it time yet? But by the 4th day, the pain had definitely subsided a lot. So I'd be like, I'm not feeling very good. And then I'd be like, oh, it's because I can take my medication now. So that was nice. So first 3 days, super hard. The 4th day, you start feeling better. Now for the first 2 days, nothing in this area moved. I didn't feel any gurgling or anything. Everything was was traumatized. But by the 3rd day, I could feel like bubbles starting to move and things were starting to move through. So that was uncomfortable, but at least I could tell things were moving. And they did give me some stool softeners, and I would suggest having that because those muscles just don't want to work, and you need help, and you need to make sure things are moving through. The other thing that was difficult was during the surgery, you know how they fill you up with air and they pull out as much as they can, but there's still some left, and that's not used to having air in there. So I think they call them like air bubbles. They kind of go up in your shoulders and they sit here. It felt a lot like a side ache. Sometimes I get side aches up in my shoulder if I was exercising a lot or running, those cramps up there, and it felt a lot like that, but just a lot more intense, and it would just sit there, especially when I put my arms out to try to stand up or something. That just ache and ache. And I'd move my arms a lot, I'd move my body, I tried to move my legs just because it felt like maybe if I moved, my body would have an easier time absorbing that and taking care of that extra air. Watching other people's videos about their surgery, some of their incisions looked a little bit different than mine, so I thought maybe I would draw a picture so you guys can kind of see what my surgery looked like, or you know what the incisions and all that looked like. So I'm gonna draw a picture. Let me move over here. Okay, can you see that? Okay, that's pretty good. Okay, I'm just gonna kind of put a waist in here so we can kind of do a shape of a body. So here's our waist. Here's our belly button. Okay, so I had 3 incisions. Right above my belly button, I had about 1.5 inches incision right here. Now, I didn't have any staples. It was all just glued. So it was glued, and then I had like gauze laid across it. Then I had this little one where I think they put the camera in, and it was glued and just had a few little strips across it. This one was about 1.5 inches. This one was maybe 1/2 inch, probably smaller than that. And then my catheter came off of my left side. So let's see, this is facing you. I'm trying to think, which way is the left or the right? So, and I just had a hole right here. There's a hole and this is where the tubing came up, and it was attached to my transfer set. And it was just a hole. So I saw somebody else's where it was like an incision across like this, but mine was just a hole. I could feel the tubing under my skin. They said some people can't feel it's there, but I had lost so much weight from being ill that I had nothing extra. So I could feel the tubing kind of comes up and around this and then disappears. But when I woke up from surgery and went home, there was a big bandage across from that, so I couldn't really see it. It was all covered, and so that stayed on for about a week, and then a week and a half, and then after that started training for doing peritoneal dialysis, and the nurses did a bandage exchange for me, and then after that I was able to like bathe and start to go back to normal. So that's kind of what it looked like for me. All right. I hope this next part will be really helpful to somebody. These are the things that my husband and I learned from going through this, and things that we would do different if I had to go through the surgery again, which I might have to. I might transplant, get a kidney, and then end up back on dialysis. And I hope I'll be able to do peritoneal again. All right, so the first thing, I would be a better advocate for myself. I'd ask more questions. Now, I have to give myself a little bit of grace because at this point in time in my life, I was very ill, and you're just kind of dealing with day to day. And I knew that my brain function wasn't as sharp as it was before. I mean, my kidneys aren't working, there's toxins in my blood, and I think just knowing that you're not as sharp as you are, I just didn't ask as many questions because I'm like, well, I know I'm not as sharp, and I don't want them to think I'm dumb. And I think that's another reason why maybe people do hemo, because they're like, I don't have the energy, I'm not as sharp as I used to be. Maybe it's just better to let somebody take care of me. But you have to realize that once you're on dialysis, whether it's hemo or peritoneal, but once you're on it and you start doing it, you start feeling better, you start improving. So even if you feel like you're not quite as sharp, you're gonna get your mind back, you're gonna get sharp again. So the training and the learning is really simple and easy to do. They don't push you. So that's just, sorry, that's a little, I just really appreciate being able to do peritoneal. That's why I'm making these videos, so people are more aware of it, that it's an option that's a little more gentle on your body than hemo. I have never had a doctor be like, why are you asking a question? No, they're more than happy, to explain something. Say, I'm sorry, I don't quite understand. Can you explain that again? Can you do it in a different way? I don't think any of them would mind, making sure that you understand what's happening to you. So the first thing I would have asked is, because of my hemoglobin was really low, I would have asked, can we wait? Why do we need to do the surgery right away? Can I get a blood transfusion and then the surgery? I may have needed to do the surgery. Nothing may have changed, but the fact that I'd asked questions and I knew what was happening, I think that would have made me feel a little more, I think it would have made me feel a little more like I was in control of my life. We rely so much on those, in the medical field, because they know, but there's nothing wrong with asking questions and saying, Are there other options? I may not go with it, but I'd like to know what it is so that I feel like I'm making my own choices. The next thing I would do differently was I would make sure that the anesthesiologist looked at my record and saw that I don't do well with medication ending in PAM. So some of the medications that they use to put you under are in that same family. I didn't realize that this was an issue until I had surgery later, and a different anesthesiologist said, hey, I saw that this is on your record and I'm going to give you different medication. And after that surgery, I had no problems waking up. It was really nice. So I would definitely do something different because it was so hard to wake up. I also, when I was a teenager, had surgery on my knee, and I just remember the same thing. It's like pulling yourself through molasses, through cloth, or just pulling yourself awake. It is mentally and physically exhausting, and you just feel so yucky waking up. So that's something that I'd make sure, hey, this is on my record that I'm allergic to. Please don't give me anything like that. The other thing that we would change was preparing and setting up our home better. The couch is kind of low to the ground, so what we would do differently is we'd raise that up, or we'd bring down a bed, something in which where I was resting was a lot higher up the ground, so just more like a hospital bed, so when you kind of roll to stand up, you don't have to physically like stand yourself up. You roll and you're already standing. I think that would have made it a lot easier to use the restroom because I wouldn't have been using my abdomen muscles so much. The other thing is I would have raised the toilet seat somehow. I've seen little seats that are like above the toilet, or even just putting a cushion on the toilet seat to raise it up a little bit so I didn't have to drop down or stand up so much from the toilet. That was the hardest part. By the fourth day, probably halfway through the third day, I was able to kind of grab onto the counter. It's pretty close to where the toilet is, and stand myself up, which is so nice. It's really nice to be independent, especially in that department. The other thing is they didn't want to send me home with medication, so for anybody else out there, I needed the medication. So I'm glad I was able to send some home with me, or to get a prescription of pain medications to take. I know as kidney patients, we kind of stay away from pain medications or anything that can affect our kidney function. But by this point, my kidneys were pretty much not working, and they're not going to give you something that's going to hurt you or damage your kidneys more. So if you need the pain medication, take it. I think that would help with the recovery, because you're able to sleep, you're able to relax and rest a little bit more because you're not in pain. And it was a tough surgery. It was, more than we thought. I think partially because it was a day surgery. Come in, go home to recover. It was a bigger deal than I expected. So I hope that this video will help somebody who is thinking about getting the surgery or going to have this surgery to be better prepared. The 3 days of discomfort was worth the surgery. Being able to do peritoneal dialysis, I think I've said this a couple times, but this is the whole purpose of my videos, is to help people be able to know and be able to do peritoneal dialysis rather than hemo. I think it's better and easier on the body. It gives you more freedom to continue your life. And once you start doing dialysis, now I haven't done hemo, but once I started doing peritoneal, it took a couple of weeks to get comfortable, for my body to get used to it, but I started to improve. I started to feel better, and I talked about how, you're not as sharp or as bright as you used to be. I think that recovered the fastest. I'm starting to get myself back. So I hope that this is helpful. Again, if you have questions or something that you want me to talk about or discuss about, go ahead and put a comment below. Thank you. The anesthesiologist.
Nope.
Anesthesiologist.
Yes.
Anesthesiologist. Anesthesiologist. Did you get it? Yeah. All right, so the anesthesiologist did not ask questions. Did I do it right?
Yeah.
Okay. I have to say it again.